huge Russian missile and drone salvo launched at Ukraine on Monday targeted energy facilities nationwide and left several people dead. Thousands of residents took shelter underground as sirens blared through Kyiv overnight. I would like to see a response to Moscow so that they will feel what we feel, says this woman. In the southern Zaporizhia region, this woman says she heard a loud explosion and sought safety. Later, she found out her brother was killed in the blast. She says she couldn't get too close because his house was blocked off. I was still shaking, and then I saw him, and I couldn't recognize him, she says. Ukrainian officials say Russia launched more than 200 missiles and drones in the attack. And neighboring NATO member Poland reported a drone had probably entered its airspace during the bombardment. Kyiv said the attack targeted power or other critical infrastructure in at least 10 regions. This is the aftermath of a strike on one power plant. Power cuts and water supply outages were reported in many areas, including parts of the capital. President Volodymyr Zelensky said work was already underway to get power flowing again. Monday's attack was the most intense in weeks. It comes as Ukraine is claiming new ground in a major cross-border incursion into Russia's southern Kursk region. Meanwhile, Russian forces are steadily inching forward in Ukraine's east. Both Russia and Ukraine deny deliberately targeting civilians. Each says its attacks are aimed at destroying infrastructure critical to the other's war effort.
U.S. Special Counsel Jack Smith has asked a federal appeals court to revive the criminal case accusing Donald Trump of retaining classified documents. That's after a Trump-appointed judge in a lower court dismissed the indictment in July, ruling that Smith was unlawfully appointed and did not have the legal authority to bring the case. Smith's Monday court filing argued that Eileen Cannon was wrong in ruling that U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland's decision to appoint Smith in 2022 violated the U.S. Constitution. Smith and his team urged the appellate court to reverse her order and to schedule oral arguments, writing that Cannon had, quote, deviated from binding Supreme Court precedent and also misconstrued the statutes that authorize the special counsel's appointment. In the case, Trump was indicted on charges that he willfully retained sensitive national security documents at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida after leaving office in 2021 and obstructed government efforts to retrieve the material. Trump's lawyers had previously challenged the legal authority for Smith's appointment, arguing that Smith's office was not created by Congress and the special counsel was not confirmed by the Senate. Cannon's decision to dismiss the case came not long after the Supreme Court ruled that Trump had broad criminal immunity from prosecution for official actions he took during his time in office. Her ruling marked a legal victory for Trump, but has also faced staunch criticism, with many attorneys saying it flies in the face of prior court decisions which all upheld the legality of rules the Justice Department has relied on for years to appoint special counsels. Trump's campaign said on Monday that the court should reject Smith's request, and that other cases the former president faces should be dismissed.
It's the U.S. government versus two grocery store giants, as the trial to block the $25 million merger between Kroger and rival Albertsons kicked off in federal court on Monday. The U.S. Federal Trade Commission and several states have sued the grocers on the grounds that the proposed deal would eliminate competition, resulting in higher prices for shoppers and less bargaining power for unionized grocery workers. Kroger and Albertsons argue that the merger is necessary in order to compete with the likes of Walmart, the largest grocery retailer in the U.S., as well as Costco and Amazon, which owns Whole Foods. It's a high-profile case for the Biden administration as it looks to lower prices for consumers. Higher grocery bills are also an issue in the presidential race between Democratic Vice President Kamala Harris and her Republican rival, former President Donald Trump. The trial is also a key test of FTC Chair Lina Khan's initiative to use antitrust law to boost wages and mobility for workers. Labor has been an area of focus for Khan, a former law professor and congressional antitrust counsel who took the reins of the agency in mid-2021. Kroger, for its part, has said it will sell about 1/10 of the approximately 5,000 stores it would own if the deal is allowed to go through. The grocer has also pledged to slash prices at stores by $1 billion after the merger. The trial is expected to last around 3 weeks.
Premature Palestinian babies were being evacuated from the main hospital in Gaza's Deir Bala on Monday, following new evacuation orders issued by Israel. The United Nations said humanitarian aid operations in the area have ground to a halt as a result of the new orders, and more families have been forced to flee. Some now live in makeshift tents on the beach in Gaza's Khan Yunis.
We are ordinary people, peaceful people. We have nothing to do with what is happening. We end up stepped on like this. They want Hamas. Where are they? Have the Israelis caught them? They only caught the people and destroyed the people. They have sent them back to the Stone Age. All of our life's harvest is gone. Bulldozers have run over our house and flattened it, leaving no trace. All the shops are gone. Why? What have we done? We have been displaced 4 times in 2 days. We were displaced twice in 1 day and 1 night.
Israel has issued several evacuation orders across Gaza in recent days, the most since the beginning of the 10-month-old war. Israel said its forces intended to act against Hamas and other militant groups operating in the area. On Monday, medics said Israeli military strikes killed several Palestinians. The recent escalation comes with little hope of an end in sight to the war, as diplomacy efforts by Qatar, Egypt, and the United States have so far failed to close the gap between Israel and Hamas, whose leaders trade blame over the lack of a ceasefire agreement. According to 2 Egyptian security sources, neither Hamas nor Israel agreed to several compromises presented by mediators at talks in Cairo on Sunday.
Scores of people were killed in the Pakistan province of Baluchistan when separatist militants attacked police stations, railways and highways, accompanied by retaliatory operations from security forces. That's according to officials on Monday. The assaults were the most widespread in years by ethnic militants, who are fighting for Baluchistan to secede from the rest of the country. The southwestern province is rich in resources and also hosts significant projects led by China. Interior Minister Mohsin Naqvi said these attacks are a calculated attempt to create chaos in Pakistan.
We have a good idea of who planned this and who is behind them. These attacks are a well-thought-out plan and carried out in 1 day. We consider it an attack on us. One thing is sure, that the entire leadership has decided to respond with full force.
Pakistan's military said 14 soldiers and police and 21 militants were killed in fighting after the largest of the attacks, which targeted buses and trucks on a major highway. Baluchistan's chief minister said nearly 40 civilians were also killed. The Baluch Liberation Army, armed militant group, took responsibility for the operation. In a statement to journalists, they claimed more attacks over the last day that had not yet been confirmed by authorities as of early Monday. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif vowed that security forces would retaliate and bring those responsible to justice.
Switzerland is finally catching up with other European countries when it comes to electronic payments. Swiss companies and consumers are now able to make ultra-fast electronic payments that allow credit transfers within 10 seconds, instead of waiting days for a transaction to clear. Electronic payments have been around in Europe since 2017 and in the US since last year. AI is a key feature that powers the development of such payments. But the Swiss have been quite attached to their physical money. According to a Swiss National Bank survey earlier this year, cash remains the most accepted method of payment by companies with physical points of sale. That's despite the rise of mobile payment apps. The SNB reported that around 60 financial institutions are now able to receive and process instant payments. That covers more than 95% of Swiss retail transactions. They also predicted that all financial institutions in Switzerland will be on board by the end of 2026. The SNB report stated, "This market launch represents a further important milestone and reflects the collective stakeholder commitment to the future of cashless payments in Switzerland." According to the European Central Bank, the use of instant payments in Europe has risen from 5.2% of all credit transfers in October 2019 to 17.8% in February this year.
500 and NASDAQ closed lower on Monday, as AI heavyweight Nvidia dipped ahead of its quarterly report later in the week. The Dow, meanwhile, ticked up modestly to close at a record high. The S&P shed about 0.3%, and the NASDAQ lost more than 0.8%. Shares of Nvidia dropped 2.25% ahead of its earnings report Wednesday, the stock market's most closely watched event of the week. But Skylar Winan, chief investment officer at Reagan Capital, thinks Nvidia's dip and the broader pullback in equities is normal given this year's rally.
Stock market has had a tremendous run year to date. Upper teens puts us on pace for an annualized almost 30% return for the S&P and the NASDAQ. So yeah, it's expected to see a little bit of a pullback here. You know, long-term normal is 8 to 11%. So we could see a pullback here, especially going into September. But you know, we think Nvidia is going to have a good report here on Wednesday, and we think long-term the stock market's on pace to continue to return low doubles.
But some investors worried that anything short of another stellar forecast from Nvidia could shatter Wall Street's rally in AI-related companies, including Microsoft and Meta Platforms, shares of which closed lower on Monday. Fellow Magnificent Seven member Tesla lost more than 3% after Canada said it would impose a 100% tariff on imports of Chinese electric vehicles, following the lead of the US and European Union. Among other movers, shares of Caterpillar and American Express rose to help lift the Dow. Monday marked the first full trading day since Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell said on Friday that the time has come to start cutting interest rates. To that end, investors will look to this Friday's personal consumption expenditure data for July, the central bank's preferred inflation gauge.
Chinese-made electric vehicles face a new set of tariffs, this time from Canada. The country said Monday it would impose a 100% duty on imports of the cars. That follows similar moves by the US and EU. The levies make no exception for Tesla vehicles manufactured in China. That's in contrast with Europe, which gave Elon Musk's firm a lower rate in return for cooperating with its probe into Chinese exports. Tesla shares fell over 3% following the news. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said Ottawa was acting to counter what he called Beijing's intentional overcapacity.
We are transforming Canada's automotive sector to be a global leader in building the vehicles of tomorrow. But actors like China have chosen to give themselves an unfair advantage in the global marketplace, compromising the security of our critical industries and displacing dedicated Canadian autos and metal workers.
Responding to the news, China's embassy in Canada called the move protectionist and said Ottawa was ignoring World Trade Organization rules. The new tariffs also include a 25% duty on Chinese metals, including steel. And Trudeau said punitive measures on chips and solar cells could follow. US President Joe Biden in May quadrupled tariffs on Chinese EVs to 100%. The EU has imposed duties going up to just over 36%.
A chaotic bidding war for Paramount ended on Monday. Media heavyweight Edgar Bronfman Jr. announced he had dropped out of the running. That cleared the way for Skydance Media to take control of the entertainment group. Last week, an investment group led by Bronfman had proposed to take control of Paramount through a $6 billion bid. It aimed to buy the media firm's controlling shareholder, National Amusements. The move had threatened to derail an $8.4 billion agreement reached by Paramount and Skydance in July. But a source said Bronfman couldn't come up with an equity financing package needed for his bid. They said a few of his key equity partners on the deal dropped out late in the day, ending any hope he could seriously challenge the Skydance bid. A spokesperson for Shari Redstone, who owns National Amusements, could not immediately be reached for comment. Skydance declined to comment. Paramount expects the deal with Skydance to close in the first half of next year, pending regulatory approval.
It's getting harder for Nvidia to impress investors. The AI chip champion is forecast to say Wednesday that its second quarter revenues more than doubled. A forecast compiled by LSEG predicts they will hit almost $28.7 billion. And yet, even that might seem a come down, when the previous 3 quarters saw growth exceed 200%. Investors are also concerned that profit margins could suffer, hurt by the cost of ramping up production. There's concern too over possible delays to the company's next-generation Blackwell chips, which some analysts have said face delays. Customers are a worry as well, with some market watchers questioning whether big tech can sustain its massive spending on AI. Such doubts led to a 20% drop in Nvidia stock over July and August, though it later clawed back much of those losses. Now any big beat or miss on Wall Street expectations could fuel or shatter an AI-driven stock rally. Nvidia shares have gained over 150% this year, adding around $1.8 trillion to its market value and driving the S&P index to fresh highs. Also in focus Wednesday will be the company's prospects in China, where the US government bars sales of its most advanced chips. Investors hope new processors designed to comply with the regulations can drive sales growth and fend off a growing challenge from Chinese rival Huawei.
Wild ride? The Ultimatum on Netflix takes reality TV to the next level. Couples on the brink of marriage or breakup enter trial marriages with different partners, facing the ultimate choice: stay together, split up, or start anew. With minimal rules and maximum drama, anything goes in this outrageous show. While not a strict rule, producers on The Ultimatum discourage contestants from contacting their exes, other partners they are not currently in a trial marriage with. Executive producer Chris Colin explained to Variety that while there's no formal rule, it's generally understood that contacting an ex during the trial marriage is frowned upon, much like in real marriage. The Ultimatum has faced criticism for depicting violent altercations between couples each season. Producers defend their handling of these incidences. Zay and Ray had a physical altercation after he stayed out till 8 a.m. Though not shown, Ray expressed a great regret. Executive producer Chris Colin stated that the team monitors contestants and offers immediate support, ensuring a producer was present during the incident. Ray regretted her actions and acknowledged they were wrong. Zay didn't retaliate, and Ray apologized. In The Ultimatum Queer Love reunion, Mildred Bastillo admitted to being arrested for throwing items at Tiff Durr. Tiff claimed producers knew but didn't separate them. Lisa Horne shocked viewers by hitting her boyfriend, Brian Okoye, after he flirted with another woman. Lisa later apologized to Brian, Rhea, and others affected by her behavior, both privately and publicly. Casting is key for any reality show, and The Ultimatum is no different. Producers select a location to find couples, like Austin, Texas for Season 1. Chris Colin, CEO of Kinetic Content, explained that they cast within specific areas to make real-world connections possible. The casting team uses social media, community groups, and bars to find couples who've been together at least a year and are at a crossroads. They also look for potential love connections for the pairs, ensuring participants have options they might be interested in.
Change would not happen overnight. When there's a deep rot at the heart of a structure, you can't just cover it up. You can't just tinker or rely on quick fixes. But these riots didn't happen in a vacuum. They exposed the state of our country, revealed a deeply unhealthy society, the cracks in our foundations laid bare, weakened by a decade of division and decline, infected by a spiral of populism which fed off cycles of failure of the last government. That's what we've inherited. Not just an economic black hole, a societal black hole. And that's why we have to take action and do things differently. And part of that is being honest with people about the choices that we face, how tough this will be. And frankly, things will get worse.
Today I can announce that subject to the bill passing, the overall number of international students starting a course next year will be set at 270,000. This includes higher education courses and vocational education and training courses. And what this means is next year that there'll be about the same number of international students starting a course here as there were before the pandemic. There'll be more in our universities and there'll be fewer in our private vocational providers. There's about 10% more international students in our universities today than before the pandemic, and about 50% more in our private vocational and training providers. Students are back, but so are the shonks, people that are seeking to exploit this industry to make a quick buck. And we're implementing a number of reforms to tackle that.
Oh, uzun pertakapan di Perak.
Okay.